Affini is a systems integrator specializing in consultancy, design, deployment, and in-life management of complex infrastructure technology and communication solutions. BYOD and multi-tenancy environments is a great example of the type of projects we help organizations with. This isn't a presentation of how BYOD will solve all your problems. It's not going to tell you how it will save you 30% from your bottom line, or that you can reduce service desk calls by half. Instead, we'll be discussing some of the different models of BYOD, what people want from it, and touch on some ideas of how to deliver it. More specifically, we'll also be talking about the risks and reality of deploying BYOD. For example, the challenges a self-service support model will bring to how you can deliver a different BYOD service to different tiers of your organization, and how planning the boring stuff like compliance and governance is important if your deployment is to be successful. Let's start by looking at what we mean by multi-tenancy. Our definition is an environment which provides multiple users and devices access to services in a secure and compliant framework. As the combination of devices, users, and services multiplies, so does the complexity and risk, and of course, the cost. But what does this actually mean? Basically, large organizations have various tiers of service, whether this be their users, their customers, or their guests. For example, an airport isn't in fact a landlord. It will have its staff, its customers, such as the shops and restaurants and services, and of course, the passengers. All want access to basic services such as internet via Wi-Fi. All might have different devices and requirements to access other services, which makes creating an environment that will, in effect, please everyone very complex, especially when you don't control all the assets. So while BYOD can be delivered in simple or complex multi-tenant environments, regardless of the complexity, there are still factors to consider before you begin your deployment. Our first question is, what is it you want to deliver? And what is it that your user customers are wanting? Where to begin? It's important to think about the type of service model you want to offer and plan accordingly. Is a service for users to bring their own devices to access to basic services such as internet, files, email, and calendar? This is a simpler model, but the fragmentation and scale of devices is difficult to predict, which makes support and management of the infrastructure more complex. That is, how many users, how many devices, concurrency, etc. Or is it a commercial deployment where devices are provided for specific roles in a more structured model? How often have you heard, "Hi, I'm Bob from marketing. We just received a delivery of 100 iPads and we want them to access our new cloud app, which, by the way, we've already purchased. Can you set them up, grant them access to Wi-Fi, and support them when they go wrong?" Entire departments want to bring their own devices too. They will see a mobile device, a Wi-Fi, an internet connection, and think, well, why can't I use this for my new project? While in theory they can, this may lead to IT governance and support being bypassed, usually until it's too late to change direction. However, a well-planned and executed model is when the business and IT utilize new technologies and existing architectural building blocks, like an example of a project that we worked on at Gatwick Airport. This is for the deployment of information kiosks around the airport to provide passenger information, wayfinding, and flight information. The same devices, the same content, but it needed to be delivered in a seamless and effective way. So in this example, the models of devices are generally the same, as are the access methods to the service, a simple and successful delivery. However, in other scenarios, such as at another client, Nuffield Health, the level of compliance may be complex due to, for example, the sensitivity levels of the content. That is, they implemented a solution to view patient X-ray information on mobile devices. Clearly, such a model requires significant security validation and data protection. So, based on our experience of working with clients on these models, we came up with a basic framework. Here's our framework approach to BYOD. Bottom up, you have the users and/or departments who bring their devices, which utilize the infrastructure, all of which is protected by security and governance. But what's the reality of BYOD? Ultimately, it's a myriad of possibilities. Multiple users from different tiers of an organization bring multiple devices, which need access to multiple tiers of the infrastructure and applications, all with their own multiple levels of security and governance. Over the next few slides, we'll refer back to this framework and explain some of the challenges and possibilities. First up, the users and their perception and requirements. What do they want from BYOD? Users just want access to their data. This might be their email or some of their files or applications. The system administrator needs to protect his estate. He or she is responsible for security and the protection of the estate and the data. The CIO needs to protect his budget. He sees BYOD as a potential way of reducing cost and overhead, not increasing it. Taken individually, each of these problems are relatively easy to solve. The reality is they have a tendency to conflict with one another. In short, a user wants to do what they want. A systems administrator wants to control them, and the CIO doesn't want to spend any more money providing access and control. For many organizations is that if IT doesn't provide the ability for a user to access their data, they will work out a way of doing this themselves. This is a huge security risk, possibly in a worst case scenario, can cause reputational damage. So, how do you begin to plan what will and can be introduced in your BYOD strategy? Start by thinking about your BYOD strategy and how this fits within your overall IT strategy. What model will you deliver? An open BYOD model or a deployed model? What applications and services will you deliver and to what devices? As we've discussed, multi-tenant can mean, amongst other things, a constantly changing multi-client device. iOS, Android, Windows, Symbian, BlackBerry, each with their own models, brands, features, and software versions. Question: will you support all your applications and services on them all, or just some? But how do you know which devices will and won't work? Is it possible to test each device with your own configuration? We've seen a scenario where every mobile phone and OS combination worked on a Microsoft ActiveSync apart from Microsoft Windows 8 Mobile. The problem? An aggressive MDM security policy which the Windows Mobile OS could not handle, and this was not documented anywhere. So, how will you test which devices will and won't work? IT systems administrators invariably receive new devices on the same day as the user, and this can be too late. So who tested how an iPhone 5's fingerprint scanner worked with their MDM solution before the iPhone 5s came out? The fingerprint unlock mechanism has been heavily marketed by Apple. So a user goes out to buy one thinking, great, I can now unlock my phone easier in the office. The reality is, most MDM tools do not recognize the fingerprint as a trusted unlock mechanism, so it disables it. There are workarounds, but will you support them? If not, your user has just bought a device with a feature that is defunct. A few key takeaways here. Start thinking about your application portfolio. What do you want to provide access to on the myriad of devices? What applications are strategic and what will be decommissioned? What works on a mobile device designed for touch? Has anyone tried SharePoint 2010 on an iPad? It's not a great experience. 2013 is better, but how many times have you heard, I'd like application X on my iPad because it will make my life easier? The premise of using a mobile device to access a traditional app is a good one. The reality can be very different. Modern HTML5 apps like Salesforce and ServiceNow are better designed for mobile devices, but are they on your roadmap? So what are the options? You can limit which devices you will accept, but is this a true BYOD? What will your infrastructure support, and what do you need to introduce it? A key message is, you do not need to big bang BYOD. It can be delivered in small steps. Users just want access to email. So, is ActiveSync good enough? This can perform remote wipes, enforce a PIN, and other things. Maybe, though, as you mature your BYOD deployment, the level of security and control will require a MDM. These can be expensive, and there's another myriad of options available. So, sit down and think about what you want your users to do and what level of control you want to levy. Remember, the more control, the more administration, which equals more overhead. You may find you want to exert so much control you actually increase your overheads. As we've seen, users just say, I just want to access my files. If you don't give them access, they'll find their own way. Maybe they already are. The use of Dropbox, SkyDrive, Hotmail, and Gmail is generally prolific, and these are uncontrolled, unmonitored, and insecure means of sharing your company's data. How important and sensitive is this data? Therefore, it's key to embrace what the users want and talk to them about their requirements. Tools like Box, Office 365, etc., provide secure, more manageable means of distributing content to your users and allowing them to share it between themselves. Again, though, they cost. They have an overhead of management, but based on what we've discussed, they may be necessary. So now ask, how do they authenticate to these tools and applications? How many identities does the average user have? Logins to AD, to the HR tool, logins to finance tools. Add cloud services into the mix, and no wonder people end up writing their passwords on Post-it notes. Identity management solutions can consolidate these accounts and complement a BYOD strategy. Whether this is an on-premise ADFS implementation or using a cloud provider like Okta or SaaS ID. So what's the answer? We did a Gatwick case study. Such risks were identified, and two key deliverables were introduced. Initially, a simple managed deployment of ActiveSync was introduced with security policies to force PIN, enable remote wipe, etc. This encouraged people to hand back their BlackBerries and bring the devices they wanted to bring, as opposed to carrying around multiple mobile phones and tablets with them. Although simple, it was a hugely effective and immediately improved the IT customer service rating. Secondly, a cloud collaboration tool and identity management tool was introduced. And this enabled users to access their files, giving them freedom to access their content. But it was actually IT taking control by providing a secure, managed collaboration tool with SSO identity management. Furthermore, encouraging the user community through business change and education to utilize the new model helped reduce the risk of unmanaged data proliferating outside the company. The key takeaway? This will be done quickly and with minimal spend. The user requirements were met. In effect, they got what they wanted and were happy, as were the IT administrators and the CIO. We've covered 3 out of the 4 infrastructure components here. What about the network? Does the graphic look familiar? You are probably aware of the congestion caused by the demand to provision Wi-Fi to support BYOD initiatives, among others. This is especially prolific in multi-tenancy environments as landlords, customers, and guests vie for Wi-Fi access and an unlicensed radio spectrum. Some examples of how Wi-Fi environments for BYOD implementation can be segmented are 1. Corporate Wi-Fi, for connection of fully managed Windows devices to access corporate resources. 2. BYOD Wi-Fi, for devices that can't be authenticated to run on a corporate Wi-Fi and need segmenting from corporate resources. And 3. Guest Wi-Fi, for users who are visitors and need access to Wi-Fi, free or paid. So how do you control the Wi-Fi? Multiple, uncontrolled networks impact performance, which invariably leads to complaints of slowness. Generally speaking, the answer is not, let's just add another access point, which is what typically happens. So what are the options? Solutions such as Wi-Fi controllers to provide tiered subscription models for access to different parts of the network. Maru, Cisco, Aruba are examples. Again, they cost and need management. But good planning and design of such solutions will alleviate support and performance issues and can even be turned into a chargeable service in certain multi-tenancy environments. So, that's the infrastructure covered. What about support and compliance? As stated previously, BYOD isn't always, especially in the short term, going to reduce your support overhead. So, who has heard these options and how do you respond? Look at the CEO's PA example. Who has encountered this? What do you do? Is it a career limiter to say no? Or the user who has just splashed out $500 on a new mobile only to find it doesn't work on your estate? Well, how do you react to this situation? If you're allowing users to bring any device, how do you provide documentation or train your support staff in all the permutations? How do you tell them which features will and won't be available on their devices with your security policies? Remember the Windows 8 mobile example mentioned earlier? Well, it was a number of months before this was resolved, and users who just bought a Windows 8 phone, or the odd one who bought a Surface tablet, could not use the service. Maybe you want your support to go self-service. A shift left in support would not work without support and sponsorship from senior management. Otherwise, IT will get cajoled into supporting more devices with the same or less amount of resource. The reality is, there will always be a peak in support as the culture changes and adapts. This will curtail. However, from time to time, you will always get one of these questions. A good idea is to create a de facto list of models that you will support, along with generic instructions. Encourage a community where users will help other users. There's a fine line between IT holding everyone's hand and IT waving a user away with a PDF on how to set their email up on their new phone. You can also use internal social media to inform users about devices. If you don't know a feature will or won't work, tell them and set their expectations early. Speaking about setting expectations, what policies will govern the use of BYOD? Do users know that if, or rather when, they leave their mobile phone on a train, they need to call the service desk and have it reset, or that they need to log on to a self-service portal and do it themselves? Will they do this? And do they know that they'll also lose all their personal photos if they've not backed them up, or more importantly, their Angry Birds high scores? We spoke about the use of mobile collaboration tools, but is it clear that documents stored on these solutions are still company data and should not be shared, leaked, or lost? Some MDM tools mitigate this risk by containerizing the personal and business content, but again, it's expensive, has management overhead, and can be a drain on your resources. Think about your policies, about when and how a device will be wiped or secured. Again, look for the fine line. You also don't want a solution that means a user needs to enter 3 PIN codes just to get to their email. And you know what will happen then. They'll go back to forwarding their emails to Hotmail or Gmail. Finally, item not often considered is licensing. By introducing BYOD, think about whether you are increasing your license count. Furthermore, are the devices your users are using compliant and legal? A Surface RT comes with Home and Student Office 2013, which is not licensed for corporate use. If a user brings their own laptop, will it have Office Professional or Office Home and Student Edition, or will they have borrowed a copy from their mate? Where does this leave you legally and at what risk? So, to conclude and summarize, don't sleepwalk into BYOD, but also realize you don't need to do it all overnight. Support your users and embrace what they're trying to do. This is the best way to get the buy-in into the governance and management, which is imperative to construct a successful and secure BYOD solution. As most of the BYOD best practice white papers say, yes, you do need to think about MDM, but there's much, much more. Recognize that a BYOD implementation is a slice across the whole IT delivery capability. It touches infrastructure, support, strategy, compliance, and networking. Not just plug in a MDM and an access point and off you go. The reality is it won't be easy. It won't necessarily be cheap, and it will take effort up front and some level of support thereafter. Recognize this, and you will reap the rewards of BYOD. Thank you.